Hello, this is Jim Stockstill, bringing you another program from the program entitled "The Handwriting on the Wall." And I want to talk today about the Day of the Lord. And the first time I taught about the Day of the Lord was over 30 years ago. Needless to say, I took a lot of heat from the appointed clergy in the area in which I was teaching it. I want you to lay aside your preconceived notions and your Schofield Bibles and your commentaries on the last days, and I want you to listen to what I have to say today. The Holy Spirit is your teacher. Jesus said you need that no man teach you, but he, the Spirit of truth, will show you all things. Now, we are to have teachers, but it's the Spirit that's within you that allows you to see if this is real, that witnesses to what I'm saying, if it's real or not. In verse 10 of Revelation chapter 1 in the New King James Version, it says, "I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice as of a trumpet." Now, I want you to pay attention to the words, "the Lord's day," in verse 10. Too many commentaries interpret the Lord's day as being Sunday. One example of that is the Amplified Bible, which I was reading the other day, and it referred to it that John was in the Spirit on Sunday, which was the Lord's Day. But the early church worshiped on Saturday, which was the Sabbath, and the early church was Jewish, and the church as a whole didn't start worshiping until Constantine came in many years later and changed the calendar and changed the days and made it Sunday. But if you look up the word, the day, the Greek word is Hemera, and I may not be saying that quite right, but Hemera means can mean a 24-hour day, but mostly it's used figuratively. And figuratively, it means a period of time. And the day of the Lord, or the Lord's day, is always referred to as a period of time, not a 24-hour day. Now, I've heard it taught on national TV a 24-hour day, but there's a lot to go on the day that goes on in the day of the Lord to make it not a 24-hour day. This is what John was saying. Now, listen to me clear. It's clearly what John was saying. He says, "I was in the Spirit on the day of the Lord." And he's using the word figuratively and not a literal 24-hour day. The day of the Lord, the Lord's day, and the day of the Christ are synonymous terms. They all mean the same thing. And it's the period of time when Jesus begins to set up his kingdom, but first bringing judgments upon the earth. I don't know exactly when the day of the Lord will start, but it will bring in the millennial reign. And it does, in Revelation, the day of the Lord brings on the judgments, and then it brings us into the millennial reign. So I want to give you a definition that really the Lord showed me, and maybe I hope the Lord shows you. In 2 Peter, verses 3 through 8, Peter says that a day is unto the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is unto the Lord as a day. So this makes perfect sense to me, that the day of the Lord is 1,000-year day. And it begins, I believe, when he sets his foot back on the Mount of Olives and the mountain cleaves in two. It may even start sooner than that. It may start with the outpouring of the judgments, but it will end in the 1,000 years, and that'll be the end of the millennial age. But it involves a lot of things in between there. God's got to come. He's got to set up his kingdom. He's going to set up local authorities and county authorities and state authorities, but it maybe not term that, because it's going to be a kingdom. He's going to set up his people in different places in the earth. And we're going to have education, and we're going to have politics, and we're going to have transportation, electricity. There's going to be a lot of things that we'll have that we relate to now. But the thing is, the righteous will be ruling, and not the wicked. And it won't be for greed. It'll be a joy to serve the Lord, and that's what we're all looking forward to, is so that we can serve the Lord. Now, 1,000 years makes sense also. A day being unto the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years unto the Lord as a day. In the creation of Genesis, on 6 days, each day could be 1,000 years, and on the seventh day he rests. So presently we would be in the sixth day, and 6,000 years of history according to this last dispensation. Because Genesis does make strong, well, better than a strong case, it does say that the earth was recreated. For instance, God never created the water. There was water already on the earth, and the Spirit was moving over the water. So there was always water, and the firmament wasn't a piece of ground between the water, it was the heavens. God created a firmament between the heavens to separate the water above from the water below. So the earth was probably destroyed once before, and a lot of good scholars and Hebrew scholars understand that, and the rabbis understand that it was destroyed once before. So there was a pre-Adamic race on this earth. Let's see what it says. Peter starts off in Acts 2 quoting Joel, and he talks about the day of the Lord, and he says, "The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before that great and notable day of the Lord." And this verse right here is describing a solar eclipse of the sun. The sun shall be turned into darkness, a solar eclipse, and the moon turned into blood. Now, the National Aeronautical Space Agency confirms that there will be a series of 4 blood moons with a solar eclipse in the center of them, and it's going to begin this April 14th. And when we go to the Jewish calendar, not only are there 4 blood moons, but we see that the Jewish calendar is based on the lunar cycle, the moon cycle, the cycles of the moon. And each blood moon falls on a Jewish feast day, and the first one is Passover, and Passover is April of 2014. A lot of people don't believe this, but it's true. Jesus said that the feast, God said that these are my feast, and therefore it's an everlasting ordinance. So the church got out of celebrating the feast, but the Jewish people still celebrate the feast of Passover, unleavened bread, Pentecost, tabernacles, so on. They celebrate the feast, and the early church celebrated the feast. And Jesus always, he was at the temple during the Passover, during the feast of Passover, and during of course, Jesus fulfilled the feast of Passover, and the feast of Pentecost has been fulfilled. So 2 of the 4 major feasts have already been fulfilled. The next one to be fulfilled will be the Feast of Trumpets, and that's always war and stuff like that. Anyhow, any time that there's been 4 blood moons, there's been a significant change in history. And in the last 2,000 years, this 4 blood moon series will make the 8th time that this has happened, and that's a teaching all to itself. I mean, like during a 4 blood moon series in 1492, Columbus, who was Jewish, discovered America. 1948, 4 blood moon series for Israel was established as a nation. Can a nation be born in a day? 1967 was a 6-day war. So the next the next blood moon, what's going to happen in the next year. There's going to be things of significance. You don't have to be a prophet to see this. There'll be things of significant values, significant importance, worldwide, world-shaking events that will alter the shape of and the course of history will take place during this 4 blood moons that's coming up. Just because the stars and the moon and the sun was giving for signs. That's what God uses. That's God's universal languages. Universal language. Although we do have the computer now, it's God's universal language. The asteroids and all this are signs that God gives us to interpret what's going to happen on the earth. Now, it's that the first one was Acts 2. The sun won't give us light, the moon will turn to blood before the great and dreadful day of the Lord. The second one is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And Paul comes, and his subject of the day is the day of the Lord and our gathering together unto him. It's a compound subject. So Paul had already taught about the day of the Lord in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, and they got it all confused. And they were saying that the day of the Lord was already here. But he says, I beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus and our gathering together unto him, that you not be soon shaken in mind or be troubled either by spirit nor by word, nor by letter as from us, that the day of the Lord is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless there first be a great falling away and the man of sin be revealed. Alright, so Paul's coming to straighten them out. He's been to Thessalonica once before, he's coming the second time, and they've got it all confused. They're saying that the day of the Lord's already happened. He says, no, that can't happen. He says, here's what's going to happen. He says, the day won't come, the day of the Lord will not happen until there be a great falling away, and the man of sin, who is the Antichrist, or the beast, is revealed, who sets himself in the temple of God and proclaims that he is God. That's the abomination of desolation, spoken about by Daniel, spoken about by Jesus. So here's what happens. The day of the Lord is going to be preceded by a great falling away, the great apostasy. Many's going to leave the faith, as Daniel said. Many's going to fall away, as Jesus said. The great apostasy is going to precede it, and then also the Antichrist will be revealed. And he's going to set himself in the temple of God, which is the abomination of desolation, spoken about by the prophet Daniel in chapter 11 and 12 of Daniel. So he's going to act like he's God and proclaim that he's above any God. And that's going to be the abomination of desolation. And so this is going to happen. This is going to precede the coming of the Lord and the day of the Lord. But the coming of the Lord and the day of the Lord is a simultaneous event, according to Paul here, and according to Scripture, if you really look at it. And that's what I want us to do. I don't want to get us hopes up about getting out of town, out of Dodge in a hurry, because the Bible doesn't say anything about that. Jesus says that the angel is going to gather us up. He's going to descend from heaven with a shout, with a trumpet, with the voice of an archangel. He says we're going to. Jesus said that he's going to get the angels going to gather us from the east, north, south, and west, gather us up. So a lot of these scriptures have been taken out of context and have been made into by great men who are very valuable to the kingdom of God. They just don't have the end times. They think they're all things to all people, but there are some men that have the end times, that God has appointed for the end times. And a lot of these men have made up their own doctrines, and it's popular and it sells a lot of books. So the Antichrist is revealed according to Paul before the day of the Lord. And then in 1 Thessalonians, Paul says, know you perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. then the Apostle Peter adds in Second Peter chapter 3 verse 10, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, just like Paul said, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. So there's some powerful stuff going on when God comes. And Peter ought to know, Peter was very close. He was one of the three that was very close to Jesus. And Peter really loved the things of the Lord, and so he knows what's going to happen before the Lord comes. He says when it does come, the element's going to melt away with a fervent heat. Then the Apostle Paul recommends to the Colossian church that a certain member be turned over to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that the spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord. If we can make it to the day of the Lord, to when He comes, it looks like we've got it made, because Paul was ministering discipline to this guy who was in sin, and he didn't want him to lose his spirit for eternity. So he said, "Let's just turn him over to Satan for the destruction of his flesh, that his spirit may be saved." And we are a spirit. We live in a body, and we have a soul. And then in Philippians chapter 1 verse 10, Paul makes it plain that we are to hold on until the day of Christ, when he says that you may approve things that are excellent, that you may be sincere and without offense until the day of the Lord. So he's telling the Philippians to approve things and to hold on, essentially, if you paraphrase it, until the day of the Lord. So we have seen so far that the Antichrist and the abomination of desolation takes place before the day of the Lord, according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Now let's go to the Old Testament and take a look at another event that precedes the day of the Lord, which is the coming of the prophet Elijah. The prophet Malachi in chapter 4 verse 5 declares, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and dreadful day of the Lord." I now have clarity on this. I've seen this taught a number of ways. And I've seen it taught that Elijah was going to be a many-membered body, but that's not what's going to happen. Elijah is one of the two witnesses that comes back during the tribulation period. He comes back right after the signing of the peace treaty between Israel and Palestine, and which eventually will be signed. And he's one of the two witnesses that comes back. So Micah says, "Behold, I'm going to send you." Malachi says, "I'm going to send you the prophet Elijah before the great and dreadful day of the Lord." Now, after here's a timeline, and see if this doesn't fit good. After the peace treaty is signed, okay. Then we go into 7 years. That starts Daniel's 70th week. And then on the scene appears two witnesses who prophesy for 3.5 years according to Revelation. And one of them is Elijah. And Elijah has the same ministry that he had before. Remember, he called down fire and killed the prophets of Baal. He called down fire and burned up the offering that was soaked in water upon the altar. He called down fire upon an army that came to get him one time. Twice, I think, he called down fire. So the prophet Elijah has the same power. And you're going to stop the rain. So the prophet Elijah stops the rain at his will. And the other witness, I do believe, is Enoch, because it's appointed to man once to die and then the judgment. I don't think God would kill Moses twice. Although if it is Moses, I'll apologize. But Elijah hasn't died, and Enoch hasn't died. Enoch walked with God in Genesis, and he was no more. So God took him. It says God took him. So the two false prophets. Not the two false prophets. The two witnesses will prophesy for 3.5 years. and then the Antichrist comes up and kills them. And then they lay on the streets for 3.5 days, 1 day for every year that they prophesied. And the whole world watches on internet and TV and satellite, just like we're doing right now, looking for the plane, the Malaysian aircraft that's missing. The whole world's going to watch, but they're going to be really intent on this, because the two witnesses really brought conviction upon the world and really bothered them, and really made life miserable for them. So they're going to rejoice. Matter of fact, when they get killed by the Antichrist, the world is going to send each other presents. That's how much they love this. They love the fact that they got killed. But after 3.5 days, they rise up on their feet, and then they're taken up in front of the whole world as the world watches. So this is what's getting ready to happen. Some pretty outstanding supernatural things are getting ready to happen, and I hope it takes a while to sign that peace treaty, because I have things I want to do, and I want to just like you want to see your family raised, you want to enjoy your grandkids, and all of us want to live as long as we can. That's just natural. But it looks like we're coming down to the very wire, and I just hope that we postpone I hope we postpone the signing of that peace treaty. Now, in conclusion, the prophet Zechariah is the clearest on what will happen in Jerusalem during the day of the Lord. Let me read that to you. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming, and your spoil will be divided in your midst. For I will gather all nations to battle against Jerusalem. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into captivity, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. And in that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two, from east to west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain shall move towards the north, and half of the mountain shall move towards the south. Then you shall flee through my mountain valley, for the mountain valley shall reach to Azel. Yes, you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Thus the Lord my God will come, and all the saints with you. Zechariah goes on to tell about the plagues that will affect the enemies that come against Jerusalem, that their flesh shall dissolve in their sockets as they stand on their feet. Their flesh shall dissolve on them as they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets, and their tongue shall dissolve in their mouth. In verse 16, Zechariah declares, and it shall come to pass that everyone who is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So we see here that during this whole time that the day of the Lord starts with judgment, taking all the nations that came against Israel and consuming them, and then the ones that are left eventually will have to come up and pay homage to the Lord in Jerusalem every year. So the day of the Lord has a lot of things that's going on. You can see there's going to be, before the day of the Lord comes, there's going to be a great falling away in the church. There's going to be a signing of the peace treaty. There's going to be 2 witnesses come. You see, there's going to be the abomination of desolation. So the day of the Lord will not come until after 3.5 years into the peace treaty, and therefore will not be raptured until after 3.5 years until they're killed, and the 2 witnesses are killed, and the abomination of desolation takes place. So we got a little timeline here. So until next time, this is Jim Stockstill saying, keep looking for the handwriting on the wall.